So let's start with the stock market. So were you using the 401k at your job? Were you doing it independently through an IRA? And talk about, how you made a decision on I'm gonna put this percentage or this dollar amount into this, that, or the other, so people can kind of, figure out a pathway for themselves.
Yeah, so for when I first started, it was just the work 401k, and I said, "Hey, let me just max this thing out because I'm just coming out of school, don't have a bunch of stuff, don't have a ton of expenses. It was just me." And so I'm like, "Let me see if I can make life work while maxing this thing out." Um, Even though it's something that I wouldn't see until 59 and a half without any penalties associated with it, I still had more of a long range, long term view. And I'll mention this at being a person of faith. I'm like, hey, if I'm thinking about things like eternity, then it's a lot easier to think about the next 30 to 40 years. Um, so that's where I started. Now, later on, I started adding in things like a Roth IRA or a health savings account, um, different types of vehicles that are tax advantaged to be able to build wealth. And then my favorite um, is that like the taxable brokerage type accounts. And the reason why I say that is uh, I started to get really excited about, oh, I'm building wealth in vehicles that I can access with no penalty south of age 59 and a half, because that's where you start to really cut down on your, working years or just your flexibility of how you move.
And so for people who are like, okay, that sounds like some interesting things. You talked about a 401k, an IRA, HSA, taxable account. And so they're like, okay, where do I start? Do I start like him with the maxing out or attempting to max out the 401k? And was it a factor for you in maxing it out? Did your company have a match? Or was it just the fact that I knew that, this is a great way to sock some money away pre-tax, and it'll help make me more tax advantage when it comes to tax time. So somebody is hearing all these things and they're like, okay, which one of those do? What would you tell them?
Right, right, right. I'd say the simplest would be to start with getting the maximum match that's provided if your employer gives a match with their 401k or 403b, TSP, 457. Like these, I know I'm shooting out a lot of different numbers and letters, um, but whatever applies to you, um, I would say start with getting the match. Some people will call it free money. I Sometimes I'll refer to it that way, but the way I like to really say it to help people to understand is if you're not taking advantage of the match, you're actually taking a pay cut. So it's not actually free money. It's part of your compensation package from your employer. So if you don't take advantage of it, they just keep the money because it's already earmarked for you in the event that you sock that money aside. So I would say to start there, to at least not leave money on the table for yourself personally. Um, and then you can start to branch out into some of the different types of uh, investment vehicles to be able to build wealth. Now, personal finance is personal, so it's going to vary from one person or family to the next. But that's where I would say to start, just kind of sight unseen, not knowing people's
Yeah.
situation.
Now, some people are a lot of people actually are going to follow your advice and they're going to call their HR rep and they're like, hey, tell me about my 401k or my TSP 457 or whatever they have. And they're going to get either this brochure or they're going to get a link to a website and they're going to see like all these different funds to choose from, and they're going to be like stars in their eyes. So I'm wondering for you, as you were starting this journey, like how are you educating yourself to understand, what you were dealing with, and how did you go about making the decisions as to what you were going to put in your 401k or your IRA and on and on and on?
Right. Yeah. So when I started personally, um, I just I had a general feel. So I'm like, okay, well, if I don't know a whole lot about it, I probably should get some more broad, diversified things. So what I did is I bought something that was when I started off, it was something similar to a market index like a Dow Jones or S&P 500, things like that. And because I'm like, hey, the company that I worked for was a Fortune 500 company. I said, and I'll do 90% into that, the kind of broad stuff, and then I did 10% into the company that I was working for at that time. So that's where I started. Um, if I were talking to someone today, um, just a general rule of thumb, if you don't have any understanding, is I'd probably go for one of those broad kind of indexes. That could be a good place to start, and look at some of the fees that are associated with it, to help you try to trim down into where you want to be, or where you want your money to go. And research, read, get more understanding into what your money's going into, because no one's going to care about your finances more than you.
You got some favorite resources that you have read or currently read in this vein to help people?
Oh man. Um, as far as picking, um,
Or just getting comfortable with their
I
money?
would say, oh, just so I would think just a good read just in general, kind of across the board, that'll help people get in the right mindset and framework would be a book called The Millionaire Next Door. Um, it it helps to even cut through some of the noise of what does wealth actually typically look like. How do people generally move that have attained real wealth? There's a lot of things that are would be surprising for people. So that's probably a personal favorite. I know they did like some type of 25-year uh like
Yeah, his
edition. Like,
daughter.
yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep. Um,
And
which
I think
updated a lot of things.
it's the next Millionaire Next Door.
Right, 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 right. And it updates some things. Like the first one's it's still pretty timeless. Like it's evergreen content. The second one kind of brings us a little closer to now. Um, but I think that would be a really good starting point for people just to get an understanding of, hey, how do people who literally, if you're a millionaire, you're in the top fraction of 1% of wealth in the world. How do they think? How are they doing what they do?